At World Animal Protection, we know that every animal counts. We're a global animal welfare organisation and have been campaigning for over 50 years to end animal cruelty. We work to achieve global change. Every day, billions of animals are experiencing unbearable cruelty. We tackle the root causes of their suffering so that we can make the biggest difference to their lives. We give a voice to the voiceless. Our world is changing fast. As people face urgent issues like the climate emergency and depleting natural resources, we give animals a voice and ensure their needs are met because we all call our planet home. Right now, we're prioritising issues where change can transform the lives of the greatest number of animals, overhauling the global food system. And ending the cruel exploitation of our planet's wildlife. We know that the fate of animals' lives rests in our hands. Our passionate teams inspire and mobilise individuals and organisations to create change. We support local and global movements that are fighting for a better future for animals. Our knowledge and expertise give us a powerful voice at the most influential levels of government and business, where we establish animal welfare as a global priority and a local concern. Though the challenge is great, our determination is greater.
Yeah, indeed, our determination is greater to ensure that we have good animal welfare for every and each animal on our planet. I'm just waiting for my IT team to set me up to bring the video up. Yeah, so we get started. All right. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening from wherever you are joining us. My name is Lucy Wanjiku Otsula, and I'm pleased to invite you on behalf of Wild Animal Protection. I welcome you to this exhilarating webinar series by Wild Animal Protection. Our today's guest is Edith Kabesime, who will tell us about a survey we did about trophy hunting. We all know the impacts of trophy hunting. We have seen it, various proposals to make trophy hunting something to endure. But Wild Animal Protection went out and did a survey. Today, Edith Kabesime, our speaker, presents the results. But before we go there, let's have our poll question up. Take the poll, and after that, we will dive right into the webinar by Edith Kabesime. Poll question up, please. The poll question is up. Please do vote so we move on to the webinar. We have the opening poll up right now. What is your level of understanding of the phrase trophy hunting? And you can make your pick, and then I'll read the poll outcomes briefly. Nakuja. Enda nakuona tu. Okay, thank you for that. We'll share the poll results as we continue with the program. For now, please remember to join us on our social media handles. Our handle is at Move the World AF, Move the World AF. And you can also join us on Facebook. We are live on Facebook, and we'll post the results and the outcome of this webinar on our YouTube page. I can see we have about a lot of participants from across Africa, from South Africa, we have from Zambia, we have from Malawi and from Nigeria, and we are expecting more. So please do feel at home. As we start, if you have any Q&A, any questions as we present the webinar, I urge you to post it on Q&A. The column on Q&A is open as well. If you have any suggestions or questions that you want to ask, please do post them at the Q&A. We'll also look at them in the course of the webinar. And for now, it's my pleasure to welcome Edith Kabesime, who is our wildlife manager at Wild Animal Protection. She will take us through the poll that we did around trophy hunting. She'll share the results with us. She'll share the call to action, and she'll tell us more what Wild Animal Protection is doing to protect animals across the world. So now we cross over to Entebbe, to Edith Kabesime. Edith, take it away.
So good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you're joining us from. My name is Edith Kabesime. I am the Wildlife Campaigns Manager for Africa at World Animal Protection. And of course, I'm glad to speak to you all the way from Entebbe, Uganda, where currently I will be sitting today, really to bring to you the poll. That is a study we undertook to look into public attitudes in relation to trophy hunting. Before I take you through the presentation, I must highlight that today is World Lion Day. World Lion Day is a day when the entire world, people like us who are concerned with animal welfare, people like others who are in conservation, and generally people who are concerned about nature come together to celebrate the lion. Of course, when you talk about the lion, you're talking about Africa. If you talk about Africa, you're talking about wildlife, like the lion, the elephant, the rhino, generally the big five. So indeed, it's important that today we kind of stop whatever we are doing and talk about wildlife. So today, as Lucy has highlighted, we will be bringing to you results of a public poll, which we undertook around April this year with the support of FLOOD and partners. FLOOD it's a corporate that invests into research. So we engaged them in the course of this year to look into what do people think about trophy hunting. So before I go really deep into the presentation, I'll first highlight what the structure of this presentation will look like. I'll briefly run you through who we are. Of course, you have watched this through the video, but I will touch that briefly. I will go into the research itself, the background, the methodology, and then we'll go into the findings. The findings are broken into two parts. The first part of the findings is we'll be looking at the global picture or attitudes from the global respondents. And then the second part of the presentation of the findings, we'll look at the attitudes of the citizens inside South Africa. And then lastly, we'll of course have a call to action. And for each of those segments, that is international, global findings and South African findings, we'll be looking at, we'll also come up with a summary. Exactly what are these results telling us. So that is the outline. Just to recap, in terms of who we are, certainly we are World Animal Protection. We are an international animal welfare charity. We operate in 14 country offices, and in our work actually spans over 50 countries globally. How we work, we collaborate with local communities, we collaborate with governments, we collaborate with corporates, and really all other stakeholders to protect animals wherever they are, so that we change animal lives for better. Our vision is a world where animal lives live free from cruelty and suffering, and our mission, indeed, as you have watched from the video, is to move the world to protect animals. So we are building a movement across the globe, across continents, so that we tell the people that animal lives matter. As World Animal Protection, we have just concluded, last year we concluded our 5-year strategy, and we developed now a 10-year strategy, which will be running from 2021, 2030. And really for this strategy, we have codenamed it A New World for Animals. And of course, to create the biggest impact for these animals, we have decided that we'll give our attention and divided attention to just 2 goals over the next 10 years. And we are saying we will not stop until lives live a better lives. Our first goal, as you might have heard from the video, is to ensure that farmed animals live a good life by transforming this global food system. And then our wildlife goal, which is the crux of the matter today, is that we will stop the commodification of wildlife and really overturn those systems that allow it. So this is what we'll be talking about today, and we are really privileged to have you as our audience. For Africa, as I said, we work across all the 5 continents: Europe, Asia, the Americas, Australia, and of course, Africa. We said for Africa, for the next 10 years, we'll be focusing on 2 areas. The first area is ending commercial exploitation of lions and other species like the leopard, the elephant, the pangolin, those that are being exploited to be used in traditional medicine, especially in Asia. And then the second area that we'll be focusing on as Africa is to end trophy hunting. So again, we will really focus our attention on those 2 areas. One, end commodification of lions, elephants, leopards, pangolins for traditional medicine, and then end trophy hunting. So indeed, today we are talking about trophy hunting, and we think this topic resonates well with the theme of the day, which is Lion's Day, because the lion, as one of the big 5, is one of those species that is being exploited in Africa, in trophy hunting, and of course, other uses like Chinese traditional medicine. We wouldn't want to assume that everyone really understands what trophy hunting is, but basically, trophy hunting means shooting animals dead for pleasure. And the trophy may be the animal skin, it may be the head, it may be, any other body part. For antelopes, it could be the horns. For elephants, it could be the tusks, it could be the tail. And basically, this is really for pleasure and basically just to show off. What motivates this is really people to show that they are powerful. They can kill a huge animal as big as an elephant, as big as a lion. So that is what it means. And there is also what we call canned hunting, because you'll also come across that term as well. Canned hunting is also a form of trophy hunting, which happens in enclosures. This is where animals such as lions are bred in captivity, and then they are released in enclosure in really limited spaces. And these hunters just come and shoot them for pleasure. But whether it is canned hunting or hunting in the wild, both of these practices impact on animals the same way, because trophy hunting basically takes away a life, and each of these lives matter, not only to the individual animal itself, but also the other animals that are part of the group, that are part of the population where these individuals live. So trophy hunting basically deprives a life, it deprives interaction. It deprives other populations, other species of the value that these single animals would bring into the entire ecosystem. Certainly, trophy hunting is a complex issue, and you will meet all sorts of people, some justifying it, others against it. But all in all we know is that trophy hunting is cruel, especially to the individual animal that is taken away, whose life is taken away. But it's also cruel to the populations of the animals where this animal lives, and then ultimately it's taken out, and that destabilizes that community of animals. So I would like now to go into our research. This research, which was a polling, we wanted to gain an understanding on the attitudes of key tourism markets of South Africa. This research was focusing on South Africa. Why? Because the Southern Africa part of the African continent is where I would call it the epicenter of trophy hunting and all forms of other wildlife exploitation. And South Africa as a country is one of those that promotes or allows trophy hunting as a form of conservation, just being justified as one of those tools for conservation. And then the second objective of this study was to explore really what do the citizens of South Africa think about trophy hunting as a practice versus wildlife-friendly tourism. And we also wanted to gauge really what is deemed as acceptable practices as part of South Africa's future sustainable wildlife tourism strategy. So this study, we targeted, especially under objective 1, we targeted 10 countries that where the majority of South Africa, tourists that go to South Africa come from. That is in Europe, in Asia, in South America, and of course in North America. I will come back to those countries. And of course, this study is timely in that South Africa has just launched a public call asking the public to input into a white paper, which white paper will be kind of the anchor of South Africa's biodiversity conservation and sustainable use. And certainly trophy hunting or hunting is one of the elements that are reflected in this white paper. But also these elements, such as trophy hunting, are also reflected in South Africa's draft position paper, which was released last year. And this white paper, policy position paper is basically looking at, first of all, ending captive lion breeding in South Africa, ending exploitation of leopards, utilization of leopards, elephants, and rhinos, and really how best can South Africa put itself on a much better road so that it becomes, it continues to be one of the drivers or even a key player in South Africa, in Africa's conservation of wildlife. So this study is basically interrogating people's attitudes. How do they think in terms of how they look at tourism, trophy hunting as a tool that many countries in Africa use as a tool for conservation. So we conducted this study in those 10 countries, that is the UK, the US, Germany, France, the Netherlands, Brazil, Australia, India, and Canada. And then we also, of course, as I said, we looked at South Africa itself. In terms of the numbers, we targeted slightly over 10,000 people, close to 11,000 people actually. And for South Africa, we targeted around 1,000 people, actually to be precise, 1,111. And if you look at the numbers for each of those countries, the sample was around 1,000 for each of those 10 countries. In terms of the sample breakdown, age-wise, respondents' ages ranged between 18 years of age to 65. And gender-wise, 51% were males and 49% were females. In terms of geographies, majority of the respondents, that is 49%, came from major cities across the globe in those 10 countries. But also, we had respondents from smaller cities, like cities which comprised of 28%. And then we also had respondents from much smaller towns and villages, what we would call rural areas, which constituted 22%. Again, we had screening questions because it's not that we simply randomly targeted everybody. We had screening questions. So everyone that said was open to traveling to South Africa in the foreseeable future, if the answer was a yes, that candidate, that respondent was included, moved to the next stage of the study, of the poll. And also, if the person had plans to travel to South Africa, set plans already, that one also qualified to participate. So for those whose plans were obvious that they were about to travel to South Africa, were 12%. And then those who were open to traveling to South Africa in the foreseeable future, they were around 88%. So in terms of now we move to the findings. And as I mentioned, our findings are in two parts. The first part are the countries where South Africa gets tourists. That is, as I mentioned, the 10 countries: Australia, Netherlands, Brazil, India, Australia, the US, Canada, Germany, the UK, and others. So the first part of the results will be looking at what do these tourists think of trophy hunting. And we are looking at these findings in terms of those tourists that were in agreement with the poll questions. And the first poll question was, if South African government decides to make trophy hunting a key part of the country's economy and conservation policy, it will damage the country's national reputation as a conservation leader in Africa. So we wanted to find out who agrees or disagrees with this poll statement. Our findings reveal that 3 in 4 people, or 3 in 4 potential tourists or tourists, agree that making trophy hunting a key pillar of South Africa's conservation policy will damage its reputation. And to be precise, those who agreed with that statement were 74%, and those who did not agree were 16%. And meaning that majority of the respondents were in agreement with this statement. If we look at all the countries, we see a high level of agreement across all the markets. That is, if you look at individual countries, you'll notice that actually UK and Germany, these tourists were more likely to agree with the statement. And then, of course, when you look at the US and India, much as the levels of agreement were quite high as well, but we see a slightly low level of agreement as compared to the UK and Germany, and of course the others like Canada and the Australia and the UK and the US and France. But if you look at the global picture, I mean, again, as I said, over almost 3/4 of the respondents were in agreement with this statement. If we compare the results of those who were most likely to agree and less likely to agree. Again, as I mentioned, the UK and Germany were more likely to agree as opposed to the US and India. As you know, certainly the US is one of those countries that still fancies trophy hunting. But it's interesting that even in the UK, where trophy hunting again, we wanted to gauge people's attitude towards this statement or opinion in relation to this statement. Again, almost 3/4 of the tourists that we surveyed, they say they would be put off visiting a country that allows trophy hunting as a conservation tool. To be precise, 72% were in agreement against 17%. And of course, there is the 1%, which was maybe not decided. Just like with the first statement, we see very high levels of agreement across all the markets. And again, the UK and Germany were most likely, highly likely to agree with this statement. And then the US, Brazil, and India were less likely. But even then, if you look at these graphs, still even in those markets, the US, Brazil, and India, where were less likely to agree, you still really see very high levels of agreement with this statement, because an agreement level of 66%, 68%, 65%, again, this is really quite high. Anything above 50%, I think, is quite high and cannot be downplayed. The other statement that we also put across was we wanted to gauge acceptability of trophy hunting as a practice. And this statement was, as a tourist, I would be put off from visiting a country that encourages trophy hunting as an acceptable practice, or as an acceptable practice and a tool for the sustainable managing its wildlife animal populations. Again, just like with the previous findings, we see that just under 3/4 will be put off visiting a country that encourages trophy hunting as a practice. And to be precise, in terms of percentages, we see 71%, and that is 18% who disagreed. We see high levels of agreement, again, across all the markets, with the UK, Germany, and of course, Brazil and Australia. Again, we see similar patterns in terms of which countries are tourists less likely to agree with this, well, less likely to agree with this statement. We also posed a statement, and we also wanted to understand what the people's opinion in relation to this statement. which goes as South Africa government should prioritize wildlife-friendly tourism over trophy hunting as a key part of the country's economy and conservation policy. So basically, this question is looking at alternatives that are not lethal, that are not trophy hunting, but those alternatives that preserve and protect the lives of wildlife, of wild animals. Again, universally, we see a very high level of agreement, as high as 84%, and disagreement as low as 6%. And then in between, the difference is those that were not decided or had an opinion. If we look at all the 10 countries, universally, we see a high level of agreement across all the markets. And of course, for France, it's as high as 90%. Same trend for Britain and Germany, and then across. And then we see interesting result, especially in relation to Brazil, which for the previous statements, we saw slightly low levels of agreement as compared to other countries like UK, Germany, Australia, France, where we saw very high levels. So we see an increment in terms of agreement, especially for Brazil. So if we split this in terms of most likely to agree vis-a-vis those that disagree, indeed, those circles show us that countries, France, Brazil, the UK, were highly likely to agree with this statement, and then slightly low levels for India, Germany, and then the US. So the next part of the opinion, we wanted to gauge what do people perceive as acceptable practices. Again, majority of the tourists felt that facilities such as sanctuaries, zoos, and photographic experiences are more acceptable practices as opposed to trophy hunting. Again, we see high levels in terms of wildlife sanctuaries, photographic experiences being rated highly, and then the graph goes down, and of course hunting, which involves the killing of wildlife, is at the tail end, with a mere 19% of the tourists saying it's an acceptable practice. Again, across the markets, in terms of what is acceptable, we saw very high levels of acceptancy, especially for Australia, for Brazil, for Canada, and then, of course, the UK. But also universally, that is globally, we see high levels of acceptance and in support of photographic experiences as a form of tourism as opposed to trophy hunting. Again, zooming into zoos as an acceptable practice, we see high levels of acceptancy in Australia and Brazil. So those two countries simply stand out. But of course, there are also high levels. If you look at 80%, 82% for UK, 83% for the US, 80 for Canada, 82 for India. Again, those are very high levels that we cannot discount. We also ask people whether wildlife farming is an acceptable practice as opposed to other wildlife-friendly ventures. Again, if you look at these graphs, we see slightly high levels in India, but across the market, all the markets, we see very, very, very low levels of acceptance of wildlife farming as a practice. Hunting, again, zooming into trophy hunting. Interestingly, we see a slightly high level of acceptance in India, but then across all the markets, it is really quite low. But even in India, where we see a slightly high level of acceptance, it's simple, it just stands at 32, which is so low. So again, this tells us that universally, trophy hunting is not really something that is acceptable across the globe. So summarizing these results, especially for the key tourism markets for South Africa, one, amongst key markets, there is a high level of agreement across all the statements, as you have seen from all those graphs and circles. And UK and Germany stand out as the most countries where tourists really detest trophy hunting, where there is high level of agreement. And whereas India and the US also still demonstrated high levels of agreement with these statements, we saw a slightly less level, likelihood, a high likelihood of not accepting with these statements. But then overall, we saw 84% of the tourists agreeing that South African government should prioritize wildlife-friendly tourism over trophy hunting as a conservation tool. Overall, we also saw that the practice of hunting animals and killing them as a sport for entertainment as well as commercial wildlife farms are seen as unacceptable practices by most of the respondents. Of course, with the exception of the US and India, who kind of found it slightly less unacceptable. The other aspects, such as sanctuaries, photographic animals in their natural habitats, are largely acceptable across, again, all the markets, but of course with signs of less acceptance in the Netherlands and India. For the zoos, we see a very high level of acceptance in some of the markets, such as Germany and the Netherlands, but also we find less acceptance in some of the markets. So I'd like to pause at this point, maybe behind the scenes, so that we take a little break, regain, maybe take a glass of water before we move into the second part of the presentation, which will be focusing on what is this poll telling us in relation to what the South African citizens think in relation to those statements that I have just presented.
Okay.
Simba, ndovu, nyati, kifaru, chui, 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 chui. 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 Why kill an animal for fun? Why kill an animal for fun? Why kill an animal for fun? Why kill an animal?
Trophy hunting
is strengthening indigenous species.
Trophy hunting
is making them extinct.
Trophy hunting
is cruelty to animals.
Trophy hunting
is a threat to the big five. Why kill an animal for fun? Don't kill an animal for fun. Stop killing animals for fun. Never kill an animal for fun.
Why kill an animal for fun? Stop killing animals for fun. Don't kill an animal for fun. Never kill an animal for fun.
The rhinos and the elephants are killed for their tongue.
Why?
Lion, cheetah, leopard for their skin and their teeth. They use them as ornament. They use them as trophies. Why kill an animal when you can get trophies from stone carvings and plastic wastes?
Why kill an animal for fun? Stop killing animals for fun. Don't kill an animal for fun. Never kill an animal for fun.
Don't kill a rhino for fun.
Why kill an animal for fun?
Don't kill an elephant for fun.
Why kill an animal for fun?
Why kill a lion for fun?
Why kill an animal for fun?
Never kill an animal for fun. Never kill an animal.
Trophy hunting
is strengthening indigenous species.
Trophy hunting
is making them extinct.
Trophy hunting
is cruelty to animals.
Trophy hunting
is a threat to the big five. Simba, ndovu, nyati, kifaru, chui. Simba, ndovu, nyati, kifaru, chui. Simba, ndovu, nyati, kifaru, chui. Simba, ndovu, nyati, kifaru, chui.
Thank you very much for that.
Okay.
Edith, we have a question on the chat box. Do we take that now, or you want to? We continue with the questions, and you can take them later.
I'd love to continue, and we take the questions later.
Okay, lovely. So mine is to urge the people who are joining us now, the participants online, please continue posting your questions on the Q&A. We will come back and answer all of them after this presentation. Thank you, and over to you, Edith.
Okay, thank you, Lucy, and dear participants, welcome back from that short break. So the second part of this presentation is a focus on South African citizens. For those who have just joined us, the first part, we looked at the global tourists from 10 countries that supply majority of tourists to South Africa. So now we are looking at the opinions of the South African citizens. And as I mentioned in my opening, I said South Africa right now is in the process of consulting on a white paper, and which white paper in part will seek to continue to entrench trophy hunting as one of the conservation tools and for sustainable management of South Africa's wildlife. So let's now look at what the South Africans think. So the research objective for this segment of the poll, we wanted to gain insights into South African citizens' attitudes towards trophy hunting, as opposed to wildlife-friendly tourism. Again, in terms of the sample breakdown of all the respondents, as I said, we targeted slightly over 1,000 respondents, and we covered all the 9 provinces of South Africa. Those who are familiar with South Africa is divided into 9 provinces. So respondents came from each of those 9 provinces. As we realize, KwaZulu-Natal and Gauteng were supplies the majority of the respondents. In terms of the, again, sample breakdown, gender-wise, 51% were male and 49% were women. And age-wise, they ranged between 18 to 65%. But as you can see, the majority of the respondents fell within the age bracket, 25, actually majority were 25 to 34, who constituted 32%. Again, the poll question was, it is unacceptable for South African government to make trophy hunting a key part of its economy and conservation policy if it damages the country's national reputation as a conservation leader on the African continent. Again, if you look at the results, majority of the South African citizens found it unacceptable to make trophy hunting a key part of the country's conservation policy and economy. And to be precise, 70% of the citizens agreed with this statement and 22% disagreed. And of course, in between, there are those who are not decided. But for the purposes of this presentation, we focused on those who agreed and those who are not in agreement. Those who are in agreement and those who are not in agreement. Again, the findings show us that 2/3 of the citizens in South Africa find trophy hunting unacceptable if it will cause tourists to travel elsewhere. Again, if you look at how the results are split, it is 66% are in agreement as opposed to 22% who disagreed with that statement. And then, of course, in between, we have those that had no opinion, who constitute the difference between the 66 and the 22%. Again, we looked at how the South Africans view this statement, that it is unacceptable and unsustainable for the government to make trophy hunting a key part of its efforts to manage animal populations. Again, we see a very high level of acceptance of agreement with this statement, standing at 64% and 26% in disagreement. And we see that over three-quarters of the citizens that we surveyed agree that trophy hunting should not be allowed before exploring other wildlife-friendly alternatives. So people believe that there are other alternatives out there that could be explored really before embarking on trophy hunting as one of the conservation tools in this country. Again, we see very high levels of agreement with this statement, 74% in agreement vis-a-vis 18% who disagreed with that statement. Again, we pose the question, we pose the statement that the Republic of South Africa would be a more attractive tourist destination if they put an end on trophy hunting. We see a very high level in terms of agreement with this statement among the South African citizens, and a low level as low as 20% disagreeing with this statement. So those ones think that South Africa should not, that actually to remain attractive, even if it bans trophy hunting, which I think is also some think about 20%. Yes, it's low, but we still have those people who think like that. In terms of acceptable practices, again, we subjected the South African audiences or citizens to those four, actually five, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 practices. That is the wildlife sanctuaries, photographic tourism, zoos, wildlife farms, and then trophy hunting. Again, we see that really there are very significant voices among the South African citizens who really feel that hunting and killing for sport and entertainment is not acceptable as a conservation practice. We see high levels in support of wildlife sanctuaries, high levels in support of photographic tourism, but we also see high levels in support of zoos. And then, of course, commercial wildlife farms and trophy hunting come last. We also tried to compare the opinions of South African citizens and the global tourists that come to South Africa in terms of acceptable practices. And as you can see, consistently we see high level of agreement among South African citizens as well as international tourists. And the trend is the same across the 6 practices. High levels in support, that is in support of sanctuaries, high levels of agreement in support of watching or photographic tourism, high levels, slightly high levels in support of zoos, and then you can see high levels, low levels in support of commercial wildlife farms, and of course, very low levels of support for trophy hunting or killing wildlife for sport. So to summarize this segment of our findings, we see that among South African citizens, there are very strong levels of agreement across all the statements, and with just under 3/4 agreeing that South Africa would be a more attractive destination if the country decided to do away with the trophy hunting. And of course, given that the country is right now consulting and will be coming up with a new policy on biodiversity conservation and the use of its wildlife resources, this is an opportune time for really this country to rethink trophy hunting as a conservation tool. And then we see, of course, in comparison to tourists, we see significantly that more South African citizens feel hunting and killing of wildlife and animals for entertainment or as a sport as an acceptable practice. However, we find that the other practices such as zoos, such as photographic tourism as acceptable practice, and sanctuaries as acceptable practices. So for instance, if we are thinking about really transforming South African wildlife sector, especially currently those animals that are stuck in captive farms, maybe sanctuaries are one of those facilities where these animals should end and spend the rest of their lives in a much better place than they are now. And when we compare tourists and citizens and how they feel about trophy hunting and killing of animals, again, we see high levels. No, hold on. I think I went back. Hold on. Yes. So really, to wrap it up, having looked at really what these findings tell us, I think we must really acknowledge that the life of wild animals matter, and the life of each and every individual is worth much more than just a trophy that it is too often reduced to. And this is a shared view of both tourists, but also the voices inside South Africa, that is South African citizens who don't want to see their wildlife simply being reduced to mere trophies for people's entertainment, just to hang in their living room and just to show off that they are powerful. The government needs to listen to these voices, especially in South Africa, but also know that globally, the appetite for trophy hunting is very low, and there is growing opposition against trophy hunting. Even those tourists who do not participate in trophy hunting, you can see that the findings are telling us that they would really consider not visiting a country that promotes trophy hunting, and they would rather choose a country that promotes other more wildlife-friendly practices, such as photographic tourism or looking after animals in a humane way, say in sanctuaries. So without taking a firm stand, certainly South Africa is starving the oxygen from creative thinking to identify and incentivizing and implementing non-lethal alternatives to trophy hunting, those alternatives that have the potential to contribute to the conservation of Africa's iconic species, especially the lion, which we know right now the lion has lost over 90% of its original range across the African continent. And it has even gone extinct in over 26 countries across the African continent. This is an opportune time for government to rethink its conservation models, really to ensure that lions and wildlife really generally live a wildlife in the wild, which is free from cruel exploitation, and where they are really respected and protected as the sentient beings they are, not as commercial objects which are supposed to be abused and exploited just for profit. Therefore, looking at these results, what our research reveals, citizens and international tourism really want to see change. They want to see an end to trophy hunting in favor of wildlife-friendly experiences. And really, this comes at a time where South Africa is reviewing its policy, and it's an opportunity for us to make sure that we kill off trophy hunting and we kill it forever. So we are calling upon specifically the South African government, to reject trophy hunting as a default approach, sustainable conservation and development, and make a public commitment to end trophy hunting and invest in non-lethal economic alternative to support communities that depend on wildlife for a living, but also move the corporates who are the biggest beneficiaries in this sector, move them away to more wildlife-friendly alternatives, such as photographic tourism. So I would like to end here and really appreciate you for listening, and we welcome your questions, but also as to remind you, today we are marking the World Lion Day. It comes, as you recall, last month, we were also marking, I think, 10 years since the killing of Cecily the lion, which raised a lot of outrage across the globe. And now this is August 10th, which is World Lion Day. Really a day we should stop and think about whether we are doing enough to conserve Africa's heritage, which of course includes the lion, but also the other big five, and also the little creatures, the small animals, like the pangolin, the insects, the lizards, and all the small creatures that occupy this universe with us. Thank you so much, and I welcome your comments, your reactions. It's really a conversation. Thank you so much.
Indeed, thank you, Edith, for that very, very eye-opening presentation. I'm sure most of us have learned a thing or two about why we should conserve our wildlife, and most importantly, being the Lions Day today. Now we have a couple of questions from our participants, and I will urge that if you have a question, you can also raise your hand. We'll promote you and you'll be able to ask your question live. So thanks. We move on to the questions. And we have a question. The first question is from we have a question from Solomon Lubasi. Solomon Lubabula, I would like to request for an audio recording of the presentation for broadcast purposes. Yes, Solomon, you'll have a broadcast, you have a B-roll and an audio for your use after this. And actually everyone on the call, we will have a broadcast video as well as audio for your broadcast in your respective stations. And then we have a question from Sharon Atieno. Sharon Atieno, how many participants were sampled in the survey? How many people were sampled in the survey? What is the sample size? I think we take two questions and you can answer both of them. So that question is from Sharon. She's asking how many participants were sampled, what was the sample size of the survey. Then we have a question from Midian Murigi. Midian Murigi asked, how are the numbers of the hunters like? Are they increasing or decreasing? Question 2 is, how are the numbers of the hunters like? Are they increasing or decreasing, Edith? Final question from Vinex Watembawa, I guess from Uganda. Final question is from Vinex is, we are wondering if you intend to expand. Do you intend to expand on the scope of your research beyond trophy hunting? Are you going beyond trophy hunting for the work? Are you is there an intention? A question from Vinex. Yes, someone joining me on the set. Question is from Vinex Wantembea. We are wondering, do you intend to expand on the scope of your research beyond the trophy hunting? Are you intending to expand your research beyond trophy hunting? I think, Endez, you can take those three as we wait. Then we'll take the second set of questions. Thanks. Yes,
Okay,
Boy.
thank you. Thank you so much for your questions. So first question from Sharon. How many people were sampled? As I said, we sampled, to be precise, 10,900 people. And these were spread across 10 tourist markets. You remember I flashed the countries. And in each of those countries, we had a sample size of around 1,000. So 10,900 was the total. And each country had a share of around 1,000 respondents. In terms of gender, I mentioned that it was split between 51% male and 49% female. And it was actually the same split for South African citizens. They were also 51% male and 49% female. The same thing with the global, 51% male, 49% female. Precisely for South Africa, which is of course our focus for this conversation, we sampled 1,111 respondents, and we sampled all the 9 provinces across South Africa. And in terms of majority in South Africa, they came from the 2 most urbanized provinces, that is KwaZulu-Natal and Gauteng. I hope that answers your question in terms of the sample size. Miriam, your question is, what was the question? How are the numbers of hunters? Are they growing or are they reducing? First of all, I would like to clarify that for this specific poll, we did not delve into assessing whether the numbers of trophy hunters are increasing or decreasing. But from the available literature, we know that over the couple of years, the demand for trophy hunting has been going down. And of course, this follows countries like the US. Some time back, they banned importation of trophies into their country. And there are other countries that have instituted bans. So that in a way reduced the number of trophy hunters coming to Africa. Again, since South Africa was put on the spotlight, especially as a country that is promoting canned hunting, that is where lions or other wildlife are hunted in confinement. Since that outrage a couple of years ago, again, South Africa has experienced reductions in the number of trophy hunters. I can't be precise in terms of the actual numbers, but that information is available, and I'm happy to look it up. If you give me your contacts, I'm happy to look it up and make it available to you after this presentation. But overall, the trend is going down. That is the bottom line. Venex, about the scope of the study, do we intend to extend this research beyond trophy hunting and look at people's attitudes, maybe to traditional medicine. As I mentioned, Africa Wild Animal Protection Office will be focusing on 2 areas for the next 10 years. We'll be looking to overturn and end captive lion breeding and exploitation of other species for traditional medicine, and then also end trophy hunting. In the past, we have done a study also on traditional medicine, again, specifically focusing on people's attitudes, whether traditional medicine using animal parts is an acceptable practice, and also whether people were willing to take action to end this practice. We have those results. Again, I'm happy to share those results after this presentation. If you share your contact. Again, as Wild Animal Protection, our work really is underpinned by evidence. We invest a lot in terms of building evidence to support our campaigns. So my answer is yes, we will continue to invest in research because you cannot campaign when you do not have robust evidence. So certainly we'll be looking into other areas, but of course, as they relate to trophy hunting and as they relate to Asian traditional medicine. And I must say that we will be looking into what alternatives do people think can replace, for instance, trophy hunting. Of course, we have touched this in this polling, but we believe we need to go deeper into that, really to understand what alternatives really do exist, and are people willing to shift away from trophy hunting, which is lethal, to other alternatives, ways of dealing with wildlife. So those are my quick and short answers to those 3 questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Back to you, Lucy. Yeah.
Thank you. So thank you for answering those 2 questions. We'll take the next and most likely the last set of questions, and there are 3. We have a question from Ronald Musonke. Ronald Musoke from the Independent Magazine, Uganda. Thank you for your question. And the question is, some conservationists, I think from
conservationists,
South Africa, have told me in the past that trophy hunting is, yes, conservationists from South Africa have told me in the past that trophy hunting is one of the conservation strategies that countries like Zimbabwe, Botswana, and Namibia have adopted to control some animal populations, such as elephants, while at the same time earning some revenues from management of wildlife. What do you think about this thinking? And what do you suggest these countries in Southern Africa deal with their high elephant population?
Next question. Should I answer the question or there are more questions? Lucy, are you there? Hello, should I go ahead to answer the question?
Let's go to the next question. Sorry, my call had dropped there. From Fredman Isrich. We have the second question.
Second question from who?
From Fredman Isrich. Fredman Isrich. Is recreational or spear fishing? Fredman Isrich asked, is recreational or what he calls spear fishing included in this discussion, i.e. sharks, tuna, and other large fish? So the question is recreational fishing, you know, the one that you use a spear, included in this
Yes.
discussion, like sharks, tuna, and other large fish? Is it part of trophy hunting? And then, Edith, let's take the final question. I'm just scrolling here. We have a question. I think that question disappeared. Just a minute, I give you the question. Okay, I can't see the. Okay, I can't see the suggestions. Perhaps you can take those two for now. The question from Ronald and the question from Isrich. Thanks.
Yeah, so thank you, Lucy. The question from Ronald Musoke from the Independent, Uganda. As I mentioned in my opening, I said trophy hunting for a very long time has been justified by many conservationists as a tool, and of course the corporates who profit from it as a tool for conservation. Managing large population numbers has also been fronted as a justification for continuing with this bloody sport. First of all, trophy hunting globally is becoming unpopular. As I said, the trend and the demand for trophy hunting is going down, and there is global opposition, which is growing against this. I mean, global opposition against trophy hunting. Whereas for many years, a number of South African governments, especially in the South African region, the SADC region, have used trophy hunting as one of the tools for conservation. I must say that we know very little in terms of scientific evidence to show that trophy hunting benefits conservation. That is the bottom line, that we know very little. There's very little scientific evidence to show that trophy hunting benefits conservation, to show that trophy hunting benefits communities. Let me take an example. Tanzania is one of the countries that allows trophy hunting. But we know in some of the in some of the national parks and some of the sectors where there are concessions for trophy hunting for elephants, for lions and others. At the same time, that is where we have seen almost close to decimation of Tanzania's elephant populations. And there is also research that has actually indicated that in those places, communities are saying they do not see the benefits that are accruing from trophy hunting. So basically what trophy hunting does is it lines the pockets of the elite, the rich that can afford those very expensive hunts. And at the end of the day, it is those that are selling, they are selling experiences that benefit from this practice. In terms of managing the populations, as I said, I think we have not explored the more non-lethal alternatives to trophy hunting. Let's look at our context. First of all, we've said Africa has lost, we've lost, for instance, lions across Africa. 90% of their range, they have been lost. Some countries, lions have gone extinct. The same thing with elephants. We have lost elephants in the majority of the African countries. And what we see as thriving elephants in those few countries is actually just a symptom of mismanagement. If we look at Africa as a continent as a whole, I think we can, as a continent, actually invest in restocking elephants in some of the countries where we have lost elephants almost to zero, so that we depopulate so that we manage populations in some of the countries which are claiming that the animal numbers are too many. But also even not even going that route. Let's look at how have the elephants lost their range. It's because as humans we have encroached on the former ranges of these creatures. And I think the question we should be asking ourselves is why shouldn't we manage our populations rather than trying to manage the population of the elephants? Because as humans we have failed to manage our populations, and then we think we should now focus on managing the populations of the voiceless. So I think that is where we are getting it wrong. That first of all, we need to look at, first of all, what are the underlying causes as to why we have some countries struggling with the overpopulation in terms of these species. First of all, we have reduced their range. Secondly, we have expanded our own populations, and we are competing with these creatures. We are competing with these iconic animals, and we should be thinking of really how do we restock, how do we invest in. Recently, Rwanda has embarked on restocking its national parks. Maybe we need to borrow a leaf and start to invest in some of those non-lethal alternatives, because we know a living elephant is worth much more than a trophy to which it is reduced to. And we are told when you remove certain, especially the older males, older females from a population, you cause instability within that population, not only in terms of the entire population in the environment, but also even the immediate individuals that live in those closely knitted families of these creatures. So I think we need to think about those alternatives, explore them, and the next level of research should really go into exploring those alternatives, as I mentioned. Again, I can share with you, Ronald, some of the available evidence that really shows that trophy hunting may not be translating into conservation benefits as majority of conservationists believe, but also we can also show you and point you to some of the evidence and some of the researches that have been done that actually demonstrate that trophy hunting may not be delivering conservation benefits to communities. In fact, it is evident that in South Africa, for instance, trophy hunting contributes just a meager 2% of the country's tourism economy, meaning that even if it was scrapped, I think it wouldn't hurt so much the economy if you look at the meager 2% that it contributes to the local economy in South Africa. And actually, in South Africa, there is also some researches that have indicated that if we converted the 21,000 million hectares of land that are currently under trophy hunting and were converted and were put under, for instance, more wildlife-friendly tourism, such as ecotourism, it would create around 90,000 jobs, as opposed to the 17,000 jobs that are currently reported as those that are as a result of trophy hunting. I mean, that is like 11 times more jobs if we converted the 21,000 hectares, 21 million hectares that are currently under trophy hunting, if they were converted and put under more wildlife-friendly tourism practices. The benefits would be much more. That is what some of the literature available is telling us. A question from Friedman. Is recreational fishing included in this conversation? Of course, recreational fishing, it is also trophy hunting, especially if it gets commercial levels and if it causes a lot of suffering to the animals that are involved. So my answer is yes, although for today, it has not been the focus of our conversation, but it is really something that we also need to look into, because sometimes this recreation of fishing, sometimes you spear a whale and you do not kill it instantly. And this whale will go, it will escape, it will go under the water, and it will go through very bad, a lot of agony before it dies. So indeed, sport fishing, it is a form of trophy hunting, and we should also speak against it if we are really concerned with the welfare of animals in general. But as I said, for the purposes of this conversation today, today is World Lions Day, and our focus was on trophy hunting specifically, especially for the terrestrial animals such as the lion. I think that's all. Over to you, Lucy.
Yeah, thank you, Edith. And I think what we do now, we take the final question from Solomon, and then we call it a day. And I still want to add.
So Solomon has another question.
Yeah, there's one final question from Solomon, which is, please give us the statistics regarding the lions or other big five that are killed due to trophy hunting, either in South Africa or Africa in general. Do we have the statistics, Edith?
We can avail those statistics. We have a write-up. We can avail those statistics. After this event, we'll be having a press release. And that press release, we also have some statistics, but also off-cuff. Off-cuff, if we are talking about trophy hunting in general, first of all, South Africa is the biggest recipient or receiver of trophy hunters on the African continent. And some figures we know indicate that between, I think, 2014, 2018, as many as 4,000, I think 200 wildlife trophies were were exported from South Africa. So you can imagine how many animals lost their lives to this sport. I can come on with the numbers in terms of the quotas, especially for South Africa. Recently, South Africa kind of approved quotas, hunting quotas for elephants, for lions, for leopards, and I'm happy to avail those figures specifically for South Africa. But of course, we can also pull out some of the figures for the other countries and share them with you, if you don't mind, after this presentation.
Okay, thank you, Edith, and Edith, thank you for all of you who have joined us. We have heated debate on our Twitter page, as well as viewers on our Facebook page, of which we do appreciate. So we want to edit there as we go out and celebrate the World Lions Day, which happens to be today. So please
maybe Lucy,
yes.
Lucy, before you sign out, just to let our participants know that from now on until early September, South Africa is undertaking a public consultation on the white paper for the conservation and sustainable utilization of their biodiversity, including wildlife. And we really encourage our participants to participate in that consultation in a way of really sending an email or your opinion to the email, which will be availed to you via your inboxes on how you can participate in this public consultation, and basically to tell the South African government, tell the Minister for Forestry, Fisheries and Environment that as we move to the next phase of really transforming South African wildlife sector, let's kill off trophy hunting because it's inhumane, does not benefit the animals, but we also know very little in terms of how it contributes to conservation. We know very little in terms of how it contributes to livelihoods, and we believe there are alternatives to trophy hunting. So kindly, when you get that communication, participate and send your opinion. Your opinion matters.
Yes, indeed, Edith, your opinion matters. So we'll be sending that document into your emails. So please, if you have not left your email, ensure that you get and send your email address on the chat box. We'll be able to reach out to you. And for the media that has joined us, you'll also be able to receive the press release and the media materials as required in your inbox after that. Should you have any question, please do speak to us for media inquiries, because I've seen a couple of people asking for the email address for Edith and her telephone number. Should you want a media interview with her, either telephone or for those who are in Uganda, face-to-face, she's based in Entebbe and you can travel there. We'll be sharing all that through Evans, our media manager, Evans Kipkorio. His email address will be up in a moment. So we ended there, but before you go, we'll have our exit poll, which will go live. But I wanted to finish with this quote from Fredman S. Rich, who was one of our participants this morning. Fredman S. Rich says, "The human population is the underlying problem. Thank you for raising this issue." So he says that we are the problem. The human population is actually the problem. And thank you for raising this issue. So thank you so much for joining us. You are part of the voice and the movement that we are raising, and who are raising their voices to ensure that wild animals and animals at large live a better life. Thank you so much for joining us. We leave it here. We'll have the exit poll after this, and all the best. Please continue engaging with us on our Twitter handle and our social media channels. Asanteni sana from Nairobi. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
And from Entebbe. Bye.